I didn't expect anything unusual when I agreed to attend the so-called mystery dinner event. It was one of those last-minute invites that came through a mutual acquaintance, a friend of a friend, and to be honest, I wasn't particularly excited. But it had been a long week, and my wife, Valerie, convinced me it would be a good opportunity to get out of the house for once. We arrived at the venue, which turned out to be an old, rustic ballroom tucked away on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't the kind of place I'd usually choose, but there was something undeniably charming about it. Wooden floors, antique chandeliers, and a small stage at the front. It felt like something out of another time. As we walked in, the guests were already mingling, their laughter and chatter filling the air. I remember noticing Valerie as she entered the room. She looked breathtaking, dressed in a simple but elegant emerald green dress that fit her like a glove. She had this effortless grace that seemed to capture the attention of everyone around her. As we made our way inside, I found myself a little taken aback by the number of eyes that followed her every move. But there was one person who stood out from the rest, a man I hadn't seen before. He wasn't immediately noticeable in the crowd, but something about him caught my eye. Tall, sharp features, and an air of confidence that bordered on arrogance. His eyes followed Valerie almost too deliberately. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe it was just my imagination. After all, I wasn't the jealous type. But as the night progressed, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something off. As the dinner began, I noticed Valerie laughing a little too loud, a little too easily with this man. His name, as I would later find out, was Damian, an acquaintance of the event organizers, apparently. He had a way of speaking that drew people in, but what struck me the most was the way he and Valerie seemed to be in their own little world. I decided to focus on my food and try to ignore the growing unease in my stomach. This wasn't the kind of night I wanted to spend overthinking. But then, the music started. A slow song, the kind that makes you want to sway. And that's when it happened. Without hesitation, Valerie stood up and walked towards Damian. I froze, watching as she smiled at him, her eyes gleaming with excitement. He extended his hand, and she took it without a second thought. They glided across the floor as if they were the only two people in the room, moving in perfect synchronization. I tried to tell myself it was just a dance, nothing more. After all, it wasn't like we were in a serious relationship, and maybe I was just overthinking it. But there was something about the way Damian looked at her, his hand on her waist, his eyes locked on hers, that sent a shiver down my spine. As they danced, I noticed the crowd around them. The way people were watching them, the way the energy shifted in the room. Everyone seemed to be enamored by their chemistry, and for a moment, I felt like I was invisible. It was as though Valerie had become a completely different person, someone I didn't recognize. I couldn't stop staring. It wasn't jealousy. It was more like a growing discomfort, an odd sense of detachment. Who was she now? And what was I doing here, watching her dance with a stranger as though everything was normal? Then, just as quickly as they started, the song ended. But instead of returning to my side, Valerie and Damian lingered for a moment, exchanging a few whispered words. She laughed, her hand resting on his arm as if they had shared some private joke. I wanted to approach her, to say something, but I couldn't move. I felt paralyzed, trapped in a moment I couldn't control. Valerie turned, and for the first time that night, she looked at me. There was something in her eyes, an unreadable look that made my stomach twist. And then she did something that I wasn't prepared for. She smiled at me, but it wasn't the same smile I knew. It wasn't warm or affectionate. It was distant. "I'll be back in a moment," she said, her voice soft, almost too soft. She turned away, heading back towards the dance floor, leaving me standing there, alone. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just a dance. This wasn't just a party. Something was happening, something I couldn't see, something I wasn't supposed to know. And I wasn't sure how much longer I could pretend everything was fine. As the night wore on, my mind couldn't escape the image of Valerie and Damian dancing together. It was as if they were the only two people in the entire ballroom. I tried to focus on something else, the conversation around me, the food, the drink, but all I could hear was the soft hum of music and the laughter that seemed to grow louder and more intimate between them. It was as if the world had faded away, leaving only the two of them in that perfect, slow-motion dance. I wanted to ask Valerie if everything was all right, but I didn't. I told myself to relax, that it was just a dance, just a moment. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. This wasn't just innocent fun. There was a connection between them, something palpable, something that made the air feel heavy, almost electric. Every time they spun around the floor, every time their bodies brushed against each other, I couldn't help but feel a rising knot in my chest. I tried to keep my composure. After all, this was a public event, and I didn't want to make a scene. I wasn't the kind of guy to let jealousy take control. But watching them together, the way Valerie's eyes sparkled as she looked at him, made it hard not to feel like an outsider in my own relationship. I tried to push the thoughts out of my head, tried to tell myself that it was nothing more than a friendly dance, but my gut told me otherwise. Then, things started to take a strange turn. I noticed the way other people in the room began to look at them. It wasn't just admiration. It was something deeper, something more personal. Whispers began to float through the crowd. People were watching them, yes, but they were also talking about them. They make a great couple, I overheard someone say. They've got chemistry. I wanted to ignore it. I wanted to stay in the moment, but the words stung. I didn't know what to do with the feeling that was building inside me. This growing sense that I was losing her. The dance ended, but the discomfort didn't. Valerie walked off the floor, still laughing, still caught up in whatever had just happened between them. As she made her way back toward the bar, I couldn't help but notice how different she looked. There was a lightness to her steps, a spark in her eyes that I hadn't seen before. Was it because of the dance? Or was there something more going on that I wasn't seeing? I tried to shake the thought from my mind, but it clung to me. The idea that she was slipping away, that she was becoming someone else, someone who might not need me anymore. My mind raced, and I found myself growing more and more uncomfortable in my seat. It was hard to breathe. The room seemed to close in around me as I watched her interact with Damian. Their conversation, now a quiet murmur between them, far too intimate for my liking. Then, the moment I dreaded came. Damian excused himself from the group and walked toward the bar, his eyes never leaving Valerie. She looked up at him, her smile soft but sincere, and nodded toward the dance floor. I watched as they exchanged another silent moment, a look, a whisper, and then, without a word to me, Valerie stood up once again. "Excuse me," she said quietly, her voice cool, as if nothing had changed. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. I didn't know why, but the way she said it felt off. There was a finality in her tone, a subtle hint that this wasn't just about a dance anymore. As she walked away, I tried to call out to her, to stop her, but my words caught in my throat. I sat there, paralyzed. The room seemed to spin as I watched her join him on the dance floor once more. But this time, it was different. The air between them felt thicker, heavier. It wasn't just chemistry, it was a deliberate act, a choice. And I knew, with a sinking feeling, that I had just become a spectator in a game I didn't understand. I stood up, my heart racing, and took a step forward, then another. I needed to talk to her. I needed to understand what was happening. But before I could reach her, something strange happened. A voice called out to me from across the room, pulling me out of my daze. "Hey, are you all right?" A man, unfamiliar but friendly, tapped me on the shoulder. I turned to face him, trying to force a smile. "I'm fine," I said, though I could hear the shakiness in my own voice. Just a little tired." He didn't seem convinced, but he backed off and returned to his conversation. I stood there for a moment longer, feeling lost. I had to confront Valerie. I had to ask her why she was so distant, so far away from me tonight. I needed to know if this was just a dance, or if it was something more. But before I could take another step, I heard her voice. "I'll be right back," she called from the dance floor. Her eyes met mine for a split second, but there was something unsettling in them, something I couldn't place. And then, she walked away again. I was left standing there, frozen, watching her disappear into the crowd. I didn't know what had happened or what was coming next, but I had a sinking feeling that the night was just beginning. I stood there for a long moment, staring at Valerie, who was once again entwined with Damian on the dance floor. They moved in a way that seemed choreographed, a perfect rhythm I couldn't quite explain. Their laughter was light and carefree, but there was something about it that gnawed at me. A hint of something more, a spark that shouldn't have been there, or maybe it was always there, and I was just too oblivious to see it. I felt like an intruder in my own life, standing in the corner, unable to bridge the gap between what was happening and what I had imagined our night would be. I tried to talk myself out of it, to calm the uneasy feeling that was slowly creeping up my spine. After all, I trusted Valerie, didn't I? This was just a dance, just a moment. But the whispers in my head wouldn't stop. The way she'd smiled at him, the way her body seemed to melt into his as they moved together. None of it felt innocent anymore. There was a tension in the air, an unspoken energy that I couldn't ignore. And it was only getting stronger the longer I watched. I decided to step outside, away from the noise, away from the confusion that had started to feel suffocating. The cool air hit my face as I stepped into the courtyard, trying to gather my thoughts. I leaned against the stone wall, taking deep breaths, but the unease didn't leave. Instead, it settled deeper into me, like a weight I couldn't shake off. As I stood there, I saw a figure approaching from the shadows. At first, I thought it was just another guest looking for a break from the chaos. But as the figure drew closer, I realized it was someone I recognized. A woman, older than me, with sharp eyes and a knowing smile. Her name was Rachel, and I had met her only a few times before. She was an old friend of Valerie's, someone I never really clicked with, but who always seemed to have a knack for knowing more than she let on. She stopped in front of me, her eyes glancing toward the ballroom window, where I could still see Valerie and Damian dancing. "Quite the show, isn't it?" Rachel said, her voice soft but laced with something I couldn't place. "They make quite the pair, don't you think?" I wasn't sure how to respond. I had no idea what she was implying, but I didn't want to engage with her in that moment. I simply nodded, trying to keep my thoughts to myself. But Rachel wasn't done. "She's always had that effect on people," Rachel continued, her gaze never leaving the dance floor. "Valerie, I mean. She's a bit of a magnet, don't you think?" Her tone was casual, but I could hear a certain undercurrent in her voice. It was as if she was testing me, seeing how much I knew, or how much I didn't know. I forced a smile, trying to keep things light. "Yeah, I suppose so. She's always been the life of the party." Rachel chuckled softly, but there was something unsettling about it. "It's not just about the party, though, is it? It's about the attention. She loves it, even if she doesn't admit it. And men like Damian? Well, they know how to give that attention. She's never been able to resist it." Her words hit me like a cold wave. I didn't know what to say, how to respond. I had never really thought about it like that. Valerie had always been outgoing, always at ease in social settings, but I had never considered it as something more, something deeper. But Rachel's words, there was a truth in them, a truth I wasn't ready to face. Before I could respond, Rachel looked at me, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Don't let it bother you, though," she said, her tone suddenly shifting to one of mock sympathy. "It's not like you're the first one to notice. But you know how these things go? They don't last forever." I wanted to ask her what the hell she was talking about, but I couldn't find the words. The moment Rachel spoke, it was as if a veil had been lifted. Everything I had ignored, everything I had brushed aside, suddenly felt glaringly obvious. The way Valerie had been so caught up in Damian, the way she had looked at him during their dances, the way she laughed when he whispered something in her ear. It wasn't just friendly. It was flirtatious, intentional. It was something more. But Rachel wasn't finished. She took a step closer to me, lowering her voice to a near whisper. "I'm just saying, some things aren't as they seem. You can't always trust the people you think you can." Before I could respond, she turned and walked away, disappearing back into the crowd, leaving me alone with my racing thoughts. Her words echoed in my mind, and I felt like I had just been handed a cold, hard truth that I wasn't prepared for. What was going on between Valerie and Damian? Was it really just a dance, or was there something else happening beneath the surface? I stood there for what felt like an eternity, watching the lights flicker through the windows of the ballroom, and all I could think about was how much I didn't know. How much had I been missing all this time? How much was Valerie hiding from me? My mind raced as I walked back into the ballroom, but I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever I was about to find out, it would change everything. The ballroom was a blur as I re-entered. The music, now softer and more intimate, echoed in the distance, mixing with the sounds of laughter and quiet conversation. But none of it reached me. My mind was consumed with the conversation I'd just had with Rachel, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted in the room, in me, and in my relationship with Valerie. I wasn't sure what it was. Maybe it was the way Rachel spoke so casually about Valerie's flirtations, or the way her words had dug into me like a splinter I couldn't remove, but it felt like the ground beneath my feet was unstable. I had to find Valerie. I had to confront her. I scanned the room, my eyes searching for her familiar red dress among the crowd. My heart skipped when I finally spotted her. She was standing near the bar, laughing with a group of people, but Damian wasn't far behind. He stood off to the side, watching her with that same look I had noticed earlier. He wasn't part of the conversation, but his attention was fully on her, like she was the only thing that mattered. And there she was, her head thrown back in laughter, completely unaware of the tension that was building inside me. I made my way toward her, my thoughts racing. I couldn't ignore this any longer. I had to know. Was I just being paranoid? Was I blowing this out of proportion? Or had I missed something all along? Something I wasn't seeing because I had trusted her too much? As I approached, Valerie noticed me and flashed that same warm smile she always gave me. "Hey," she said, her voice light, her eyes sparkling. "I didn't see you there." There it was again. That smile. The one that made everything seem all right, like there was nothing to worry about. But this time, I couldn't bring myself to smile back. The warmth felt hollow, fake even. My stomach twisted. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Valerie," I started, trying to keep my voice steady. "Can we talk for a minute?" She raised an eyebrow, a look of confusion crossing her face. "Of course, what's wrong?" Her voice was casual, but there was a hint of something in her eyes. Guilt, maybe, or defensiveness. I motioned toward the back of the ballroom, away from the crowd. She hesitated for a moment, glancing at Damian, who was still watching her. Then, without a word, she followed me as I walked toward a quieter area of the venue. The moment we were out of earshot from the others, I stopped and turned to face her. My heart was pounding now, and I could feel the pressure building in my chest. I had no idea how to say this, but I had to. "Why were you dancing with Damian like that?" I asked, my voice coming out more harshly than I intended. "What's going on, Valerie?" Her expression faltered for just a second, but she quickly masked it with a smile. "What do you mean? We were just having fun, just dancing. It's nothing." "It's not just the dancing," I said, my frustration spilling out. "It's the way you were looking at him, the way you—" I paused, trying to gather my thoughts, but the words felt stuck in my throat. "The way you didn't even seem to notice me. You were so caught up in him." She opened her mouth to respond, but I held up a hand, stopping her. "Don't," I said, more firmly this time. "I'm not mad that you danced with him, but something's wrong. You're not acting like yourself, and I don't know what to believe anymore." Valerie's face went pale, her eyes shifting nervously. She stepped back a little, glancing around as if she were searching for an escape. "You're making this bigger than it is, I swear," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Damian and I, we're just friends. I didn't mean to make you feel like this." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But every time she said something, the weight of what Rachel had said crept back into my mind. "You're telling me it's nothing?" I pressed. "Then why are you avoiding me? Why is it like I'm invisible to you right now?" Her eyes flickered for a moment, and in that instant, I saw something I hadn't noticed before, a look of guilt, perhaps regret, or maybe something deeper. It was gone almost as quickly as it had appeared, but it was enough to make my stomach churn. I knew in that moment that something was being hidden from me, something she wasn't ready to admit. "Look, I'm sorry if I hurt you," she said softly, her voice no longer as carefree. "I just got caught up in the moment. It's just dancing, just fun. Nothing more, I swear." But I couldn't buy it. The words didn't match the look in her eyes. There was something she wasn't telling me, something she couldn't bring herself to say. And the longer I stood there, the more I realized that this wasn't about dancing. This was about something far deeper, something that was beginning to unravel between us. Before I could respond, I heard the familiar sound of footsteps approaching. It was Damian, and his presence made everything feel even more suffocating. Valerie stiffened beside me, and I could feel her body tense up. She glanced at him briefly, and then back at me, her expression unreadable. "You okay?" Damian asked, his voice smooth, but there was something unsettling in the way he looked at me. I nodded stiffly, though I could feel my jaw tightening. "We're fine." Valerie's hand brushed against mine as if she were trying to signal for me to calm down. But it didn't help. The air between us felt thicker now, and I couldn't stand it. Something was happening, something I wasn't prepared for, and I didn't know how to stop it. Damian took a step closer to Valerie, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. "I think we should get going," he said casually, but his eyes didn't leave me. I could feel the challenge in his gaze, the unspoken words hanging in the air. He was saying something without saying it, and I wasn't sure what it meant, but I had a feeling it wasn't good. Before I could respond, Valerie spoke up, her voice shaking just a little. Yeah, maybe we should. I'm sorry, I'll talk to you later, okay? She walked away without waiting for my reply, leaving me standing there, alone with the storm that was now raging inside me. I didn't know what was happening anymore. All I knew was that I had just watched my wife, the woman I trusted, walk off with another man, and I didn't know how to fix it. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, watching Valerie walk away, her figure merging with the crowd as Damian followed closely behind her. My heart was pounding in my chest, but it wasn't just from the anger I was feeling. It was the uncertainty, the realization that something was changing, something I couldn't control, and I was helpless in the face of it. I wanted to chase after her, to demand an explanation, but the words felt stuck in my throat. Every part of me told me to follow, but I didn't. I couldn't. I wasn't sure if I was even prepared to hear what she would say, or worse, what she wouldn't say. I turned and walked toward the exit of the ballroom, my legs moving almost on their own. The cool night air hit me like a slap in the face as I stepped outside, but it didn't calm me. The weight in my chest felt like a leaden burden. I needed space, time to think, but everything was spinning. Everything felt wrong. The scene in the ballroom played over and over in my mind. Valerie, laughing with Damian, her touch lingering on his arm, the way she had barely looked at me, and the coldness in her eyes when she finally did. It was as if she had slipped away, piece by piece, and now I was left with nothing but the remnants of a life I thought was solid. I stood by the edge of the parking lot, leaning against the cold metal railing, and closed my eyes, trying to pull myself together. The sounds of the party faded into the background, and for a brief moment, I thought about everything that had led up to tonight. Was I blind to what had been happening all along? Was there something about Valerie, something about our relationship, that I had ignored? Maybe I had been so focused on the surface, the daily routines, the quiet comfort, that I failed to notice the cracks forming beneath it all. I heard footsteps approaching and turned around, half expecting to see Valerie, or maybe Damian, coming to find me. But it wasn't them. It was Rachel. She stood a few feet away, watching me, her expression unreadable. She didn't speak right away, just leaned against the railing, her arms crossed. The silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. I didn't want to talk to her, but at the same time, I couldn't ignore her. Not now. Not after what she'd said earlier. You're out here alone, Rachel finally said, her voice light, but there was an edge to it. Doesn't seem like your wife's interested in talking anymore. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I stared at the ground, trying to steady my breath. What do you want, Rachel? I asked, finally meeting her gaze. She didn't flinch, didn't back down. Just curious. You look like you've seen a ghost. Her lips curled into a small, almost sympathetic smile. The thing is, I don't think you really know Valerie the way you think you do. Not completely. You're blinded by your own version of her, the one you want to see. I swallowed, the frustration rising in my chest. What the hell are you talking about? Rachel's eyes flickered with something almost like pity. I'm just saying, you're not the first one to be caught up in her charm. It's easy to fall for, I'll give you that. She's good at making people feel special. But the problem is, she doesn't stay. She never stays. The words hit me harder than I expected. I wanted to argue, to defend Valerie, to deny everything Rachel was saying, but the doubt was already creeping in. I had seen it in Valerie's eyes earlier. There was something she wasn't telling me, something she wasn't showing me. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized Rachel's words weren't as far off as I wanted them to be. I tried to push her away, tried to block out her voice, but it only got louder, louder than the music in the ballroom, louder than my own thoughts. You think you know her, but you don't, Rachel continued, her tone almost mockingly kind. You think that what you have is real, but you're just a temporary distraction. That's what she does. She moves on when she's bored. It's not a secret, really. It's just that you're too close to see it. I turned away, trying to escape her words, but they clung to me like a shadow. Rachel's presence felt suffocating now, like she was closing in on me, pulling at the seams of my reality. I wanted to scream at her, tell her to leave me alone, but I couldn't. Not when there was a part of me that feared she might be right. You're wrong, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew it wasn't true. I didn't believe it anymore. Not fully. Not after seeing how Valerie had looked at Damian, after seeing how she had pulled away from me. How could I believe it? How could I ignore everything that had happened tonight? Rachel didn't answer. Instead, she gave me a long, knowing look, then walked away, disappearing into the night. I stood there, motionless, for a long time. The silence was deafening. I wasn't sure if I wanted to go back inside, or if I even had the strength to. Every part of me wanted to find Valerie, to demand answers, but I was afraid. Afraid of what I would hear. Afraid of what I might discover. I felt like I had been living in a dream where everything was perfect, and now I was waking up to a nightmare I wasn't ready to face. But I had to. I had to confront it, even if it meant facing the truth I wasn't ready for. I took one last look at the ballroom doors, hearing the faint sounds of music and laughter spilling out. It felt like a lifetime ago, a different version of me, a different version of us. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew that whatever it was, it wouldn't be easy. I walked back toward the doors, steeling myself for what lay ahead. I stepped back into the ballroom with a sense of dread in my chest. The music had shifted to something more upbeat, a fast-paced rhythm that seemed to mock the chaos swirling inside me. The guests were all laughing, chatting, moving in sync with the beat, and for a moment, I felt like an outsider, a ghost in my own life. Valerie was nowhere to be seen, and for a fleeting moment, I thought that maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. Maybe it was all in my head, the growing tension, the subtle signs I'd noticed between her and Damian. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The air was thick with unanswered questions, and I couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in the pit of my stomach any longer. I moved through the crowd, each step heavier than the last. My eyes searched desperately for Valerie, but all I saw were the faces of strangers, all of them caught up in their own little worlds. No one seemed to notice the shift in the atmosphere, the way everything felt off, like a fragile house of cards teetering on the edge of collapse. I finally spotted her across the room, talking to a group of people. Damian was standing at the edge of the group, almost too close to her, his posture relaxed, but his eyes were fixed on her, as if he were waiting for her attention. I watched them for a moment longer than I should have. Valerie's smile seemed genuine, but there was a distance in her eyes that I hadn't noticed before. It was subtle, barely perceptible, but it was there, lurking beneath the surface. Something had changed. Something had shifted, and I was no longer the person who held her attention. My heart sank as I realized that I wasn't even part of her world right now. The reality was setting in, and it was colder than I had imagined. I took a deep breath and walked toward her, determination settling over me like a heavy cloak. I needed to know. I couldn't stand the uncertainty anymore. I needed to confront this, to find out what was going on, what was really happening between her and Damian. As I approached, Valerie's gaze lifted from the conversation, and her eyes met mine. There was that smile again, the one she always wore when she saw me. It should have comforted me, but instead, it made everything worse. Her smile was warm, yes, but it didn't reach her eyes. She didn't seem surprised to see me, and for a moment, I wondered if she had been expecting this confrontation. Hey, she greeted me casually, as if nothing had happened, as if the night hadn't just become a battlefield in my mind. What's up? I tried to keep my voice steady, but it came out rougher than I intended. We need to talk. Now. Her smile faltered, but she quickly recovered, nodding as if this was a normal request. Of course, let's step outside for a minute. I followed her through the crowd, my mind racing, each step feeling like it took me further from the man I thought I knew, further from the woman I thought I was married to. We found a quiet corner near the back doors of the ballroom, away from the noise and the prying eyes of the other guests. The moment we were out of sight, Valerie turned to face me, her expression unreadable. "What's going on, Jake?" she asked, her tone soft but guarded. "Why do you seem so upset?" I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Why did you dance with him like that?" I asked, the question tumbling out before I could stop myself. "Damian, why were you so close to him? The way you looked at him, the way you laughed. What was that, Valerie? It wasn't just dancing." Her face tightened slightly, and for a moment, I thought she might cry. But she didn't. She just stood there, looking at me with an expression that was a mixture of sadness and guilt, something I had never seen in her before. "Jake, I didn't mean for it to look like that," she said quietly, her voice barely a whisper. "It's not what you think." My hands clenched into fists at my sides. "Then explain it to me. Explain why I felt like I was invisible tonight. Explain why I'm standing here, questioning everything I thought I knew about you. Valerie took a step back, her gaze dropping to the floor. She was silent for a long moment, as if weighing her words, trying to find the right ones. But nothing she could say would make this better. I knew that now. Whatever had been happening between her and Damian, it had been building long before tonight, and I had been blind to it. I don't know how to explain this to you, she said finally, her voice trembling. I didn't mean to hurt you. I never wanted to. Then why? I asked, my voice cracking with emotion. Why did you pull away from me tonight? Why did you let him get so close? Is this just some game to you? To him? She shook her head, her eyes filled with pain. No, Jake. It's not a game. It's just, I don't know anymore. Things haven't been right between us for a while. I felt this distance growing between us, and I didn't know how to fix it. The words hit me harder than anything I had ever imagined. It was like the ground beneath my feet had disappeared. All this time, I had been thinking that things were fine, that we were fine. But Valerie, she had been feeling this way for longer than I realized. She had been quietly pulling away, and I had been too blind to see it. Is it him? I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. Is it Damian? Are you in love with him? Valerie's face twisted in anguish, and for a moment, I thought she might break down completely. But she didn't. Instead, she just looked at me with the most exhausted expression I'd ever seen. No, Jake. It's not about love. It's just, everything's different now. I don't know how to explain it. I couldn't breathe. The weight of her words crushed me, and for a moment, I was paralyzed by the realization that our marriage, our life together, had been slipping away from me, and I hadn't even noticed. The woman I thought I knew, the one I thought I could trust, had been drifting further and further from me, and I was left standing here, unable to stop it. I don't know what to do anymore, she whispered, her voice breaking. I've tried, Jake. I really have, but I don't think I can fix this. I stood there, frozen, as the reality of her words settled over me. The woman I had married, the woman I had believed I knew so well, was slipping away, and I had no idea how to bring her back. The trust between us, once so solid, had cracked, and there was nothing I could do to fix it. Not anymore. Valerie took a step back, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I'm sorry, Jake, she whispered again, before turning and walking away, leaving me standing alone in the silence, with nothing but the echoes of our unraveling marriage filling the empty space between us. I stood there, frozen, as Valerie's figure disappeared into the crowd. Her footsteps echoed in my mind, each one amplifying the growing emptiness inside me. She had just walked away from me, away from everything we had built together, without a second glance. My hands, now trembling, clenched tighter. I couldn't let this happen. Not like this. Not without a fight. But what was I supposed to fight for? Was this the end? I had spent the last few years of my life believing we had something solid, something untouchable. But tonight, everything had shifted. Valerie wasn't the woman I had married, and I wasn't the person she had fallen in love with. We were both strangers to each other, and the realization hit me like a tidal wave. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog in my mind. I couldn't stay here, lost in the maze of doubt and confusion. I needed to find her, to get answers. Answers that would either end this nightmare or make sense of the mess we were both tangled in. As I made my way through the ballroom again, the noise of laughter and clinking glasses felt like an assault on my senses. I spotted Damian once more, standing by the bar, his posture still relaxed, but his eyes alert, watching, waiting. I could almost feel the arrogance radiating off him, the way he seemed to believe that he was entitled to her attention, to my wife's attention. I felt my blood boil, but I couldn't let it be about him. It wasn't just about Damian. It was about me and Valerie. About us. She had chosen to dance with him, yes, but she had also chosen to pull away from me. Something was happening between us, something I hadn't seen coming. I walked toward the exit of the ballroom, the weight of my steps making the journey feel longer than it really was. My thoughts raced faster than my feet, each one more painful than the last. Had she been unhappy for longer than I had realized? Was this just the result of growing distance, of something I had failed to see? Or was it something more? Something I couldn't undo, no matter how hard I tried. I stepped outside, the cold air stinging my face. It felt refreshing, in a way, almost as if it could somehow cleanse the unease in my chest. I needed space, time to think. But what was I even thinking about? What was left to salvage? My mind was a whirlwind of questions and emotions, but there was one thing that remained clear. I couldn't leave things like this. I had to find Valerie. The courtyard was empty, save for the soft rustling of the wind through the trees. I paced back and forth, the cool breeze helping to calm my nerves. After a few minutes, I heard the soft crunch of gravel behind me. I turned, half expecting to see Valerie. But it wasn't her. It was Rachel again. She had a quiet, almost predatory air about her, something that made my skin crawl. "Looks like you've had your share of surprises tonight," Rachel said, her voice laced with something I couldn't quite place. "How's it feel, Jake? Realizing that maybe you didn't know her as well as you thought?" I swallowed hard, refusing to let her words get to me, but I couldn't help it. Her presence seemed to fill the space between us, like a weight that pressed down on my chest. "What do you want, Rachel?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm not in the mood for games." Rachel didn't answer immediately. Instead, she took a few slow steps forward, her eyes scanning me like she was deciding whether or not I was worth her time. "You don't get it, do you?" she said finally, her voice low, almost pitying. "Valerie's been drifting for a while now. You think she's the same person you married, but she's not. People change, Jake. They always do." I felt a sudden surge of anger. "You're just trying to stir the pot, aren't you? You've got no idea what's really going on." But even as I said it, I could feel the seed of doubt she had planted earlier start to grow in my mind. Was I really seeing things clearly? Was I really in control of this situation? Or was I just as much of a spectator as everyone else? Rachel stepped closer, her voice lowering as if she were sharing a secret. "I'm not saying this to hurt you. I'm saying it because you need to wake up. Valerie doesn't want to be with you anymore. Not the way you think. She's looking for something else, something more exciting, something that makes her feel alive again." I clenched my jaw, trying to block her out, but her words were cutting through me. I had never wanted to admit it, but now, standing here in this moment of crushing clarity, I could see the truth. Valerie wasn't the same person she was when we first met. She had changed, and I had been blind to it. I had been so wrapped up in my own life, in my own comforts, that I hadn't seen the distance growing between us. I hadn't seen the way she was slipping away from me. "Stop," I said, my voice hoarse, filled with a mix of frustration and sadness. "I don't need your opinion on what's going on between us." Rachel took another step closer, her eyes gleaming. "Maybe you do. You might not like it, but I'm telling you what you need to hear." She paused, as if considering whether or not she should say more. "You're not the one she wants anymore, Jake. And deep down, you know that." Her words hit me like a slap. I wanted to argue, to deny it all, but I couldn't. Everything Rachel was saying felt too real, too true to ignore. The walls I had built around my perception of my marriage were crumbling, and I was standing there, powerless to stop it. I had always prided myself on knowing Valerie, on being the one who understood her, who loved her like no one else. But now, I was faced with the terrifying reality that maybe I didn't know her at all. I took a step back, my mind reeling. Rachel was still watching me, but for the first time, I wasn't sure if I was angry at her or just at myself. Maybe she was right. Maybe Valerie had already made her choice, and I was the last to know. "I've said my piece," Rachel said, her tone cold now. "Do with it what you will." Without waiting for a response, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. I stood there, staring into the empty space she had left behind, feeling more lost than I had ever felt in my life. Everything I thought I knew was slipping through my fingers, and I wasn't sure how to hold on anymore. I had to find Valerie. I had to confront her. But part of me was terrified of what I might hear, what I might find. I wasn't sure if I was ready for the truth. But I had to face it. I had no choice. The truth was the only thing left that could either break me or set me free. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, the weight of Rachel's words heavy in my chest. The evening had spiraled in a way I never expected, and all I wanted was for things to go back to the way they were, when everything felt simple and right. But I knew it wasn't that easy. I had been blind, yes, but I couldn't undo the mistakes of the past. What I could do, though, was confront the truth. I turned back toward the ballroom doors. Valerie was still inside, I was sure of it. But the question that lingered in my mind was no longer about what had happened with Damian, or about what Rachel had said. It was about what I needed to do now. The thought of walking away from Valerie, of letting her go, felt impossible. I wasn't ready for that, not yet. I pushed the door open and stepped back inside, my heart racing. There she was, Valerie, standing by the window, looking out into the night, her back to the room. She seemed lost in thought, her shoulders hunched slightly, like she was carrying a weight of her own. The sight of her, so vulnerable, broke something in me. I couldn't just leave things like this. No matter how hard this was going to be, I had to talk to her. I walked toward her, each step more certain than the last. She didn't turn when she heard my footsteps, but I saw her stiffen just slightly, her body language telling me she knew I was there. When I was close enough, I spoke, my voice softer than I expected. "Valerie," I said, and she finally turned, her eyes meeting mine. There was hesitation in her gaze, but also something else, something familiar. It was the woman I had fallen in love with, and I refused to let that go without trying. "We need to talk." She looked away for a moment, biting her lip, her hands clasped together in front of her. I could see the internal battle she was fighting, the guilt, the regret. But I wasn't going to stand here and let us drown in what-ifs. "I know things have been off," I continued, trying to keep my voice steady. "But I can't pretend that this isn't tearing me apart. I don't want to lose you, Valerie. Not like this. I don't want to just let go and pretend like we never mattered." For a moment, she didn't speak. I could see the conflict in her eyes, but there was something else, too. A flicker of recognition. Something we had lost, something we could still find again, if we both tried. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I felt so distant for a while, and I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know how to tell you." My heart broke hearing those words, but there was also relief. At least she was being honest now. "Valerie," I said, taking a step closer, "I don't need you to be perfect. I don't need you to be everything I thought you were. I just need you to be with me. To be honest with me. We've been through too much to give up now." She looked at me, really looked at me for the first time that night. And in that look, I saw the woman I loved, the woman I had married, the woman I was willing to fight for. "I don't want to give up on us," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm just scared. I've been scared for a long time, but I don't want to lose you." I reached out, taking her hand in mine, and for the first time all night, it felt like I could breathe again. "Then let's not. Let's face this together, Valerie. We can work through this. We just have to be honest with each other, even when it's hard." She nodded, her eyes filling with tears, but this time, they weren't tears of regret. They were tears of relief, of hope. I pulled her into a tight embrace, holding her close, not wanting to let go. We both had our flaws, our fears, but together, we had something worth fighting for. "I love you," I whispered into her ear. "And I'm not going anywhere." "I love you too," she whispered back, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm sorry, Jake. I promise we'll get through this. Together." In that moment, everything felt right again. We had a long road ahead of us, but for the first time in a long while, I knew we could make it. We weren't perfect, but we were real. And that was enough. The music in the ballroom swelled louder, but I didn't need to hear it anymore. The only sound I cared about was the steady rhythm of Valerie's heartbeat against mine, the promise that we were ready to rebuild, ready to face whatever came next, together.